Welcome to today's video. The idea for this video is a few weeks old, ever since I discovered that you can actually run a data app on the Community Hub when you have a team plan. I wanted to do it. However, a few weeks ago at the KNIME Summit, a new feature for the Community Hub was unveiled, which is that you can now deploy your data apps and share them with any user on the Community Hub. So that makes this video a little bit more significant. What I want to cover today is how you can stay secure when deploying your data apps on the Community Hub. I will share with you 3 concrete features and techniques that you can implement yourself to mitigate certain risks. We will start by securely connecting to a SharePoint list via App ID and Client Secrets. And these credentials we are going to store in the KNIME Secrets Manager. This is a feature that is currently in preview, and I'm thankful that I have access to this preview, and it will be available soon to other users that are on team plans on the Community Hub. Using that SharePoint list, we will then first implement a user whitelist. So the way that is going to work is, in addition to sharing your data app with a user, we will also store that username on our SharePoint list and do a check against this list to see whether a user who's running this data app is actually on that list. If the user is on the list, then the app will work as normal, and if not, there will be an error message. Then we will take it another step further and use that same SharePoint list to implement row-level security, also referred to as row-level access policies. That means that we will add additional columns to the list to define which data in our data app the user can see. For example, we can limit the access to certain profit centers or regions or products. And we will see the data set in a moment. Let's now take a moment and have a look at the data apps that I've built and that we will use. It's a sales dashboard, and the data can be split by profit center, product, and region. And whenever we change the selection, the data refreshes. There are then a couple of charts, for example, a Sankey chart, a tree map, and then some bar charts that split the data by region, product, and profit center. Let's now navigate to the Community Hub. And I've already created a new version, and I've deployed this as a data app. And down here, I already have under Manage Access shared this with my second account. If I now go to my second account, you can see that on the main Spaces overview, there's this Data Apps portal. When I open that, I can see the apps that I've just deployed. And once it has successfully started, you can now see the app. And this user that I shared it with can see all the data right now. So if I now just go back to the portal, one of the risks that you face is, imagine you type low and you accidentally select the user that you don't want to share it with. When you do that, then that user gets exactly the view that we've been inspecting. They have access to all the data. So let's now start in setting up some measures to prevent accidents like that from happening. To start with, let's set up a SharePoint site. Let's create a new site. We'll just go with the communications site and the standard template. And I'll call it RLS demo KNIME. Once the site is set up, we'll create a new list. And we will add a new item, and in the title column, we will add a username. So this for now is my Windows username. So now that we have the SharePoint list set up, we want to connect to it in our data app. So I've just double clicked in it. So for that, there is the SharePoint Online List Reader node. And for that, we need a SharePoint connection. So there are a couple of ways how you can connect to your SharePoint. However, when you are using the Community Hub, there's a good chance that you want to use an so-called app ID and client secret. So we will set that up next so that we can use those credentials to connect. For that, we go to entra.microsoft.com. So you will need to have a Microsoft 365 tenant admin account for that. And once you've logged in with that, you go to Applications and App Registrations. We will register a new app. Give it a name, RLS 9. Leave everything else as default and click Register. Once you've done that, we go to API Permissions. Click the 3 dots on the existing permissions for Microsoft Graph, which is users.read, and we will remove it. And then click the Add Permission button. Then click the Microsoft Graph button. Select Application Permission. And start typing sites. Expand the options. And we will use sites read write all, and we will add that as a permission. Once the permission is added, you will need to click this Grant Admin Consent button. And after that, the status should show this green check mark. So now we need to create a secret. So go to Certificates and Secrets. Click New Client Secret. Give it a name. And select a time frame when it will expire. Once you've done that, click on Add. So now it's important that you write down the secret value, because once you leave the screen, you will not be able to see it again and you would have to create a new one. So I will copy this and save it into an editor or text document or whatever for now. Once you've done that, you can click on the Overview button. And on the Overview button, you want to also note down your app ID and your tenant ID. I will share a screenshot where some of the information is redacted in the video. With that information, you can now go back to your team. So this is my team. And on the main page, there's the secrets part. You click the plus button to add a new secret. We'll name it RLS 9. And under type, you can select Microsoft. Authentication type is application/service principal. And now you fill in the information that you've seen on the overview page and also your secret. So let me quickly do that. Before you click the create button, make sure that you select a scope. In this case, we need SharePoint. Then click the create button. The secret is now created. So now with that, we can go back to KNIME and access this secret. And here we will start by adding a KNIME Hub authenticator. Connect this to a secrets retriever. And after selecting the secret, we can connect it to our SharePoint Online List Reader. So on the Hub authenticator, make sure that you select your current KNIME Hub, or if you have multiple, then that you select the correct mount point. Once you've done that, in the secrets retriever, you can select the secrets that you've set up. And after you've done that, this blue Microsoft auth point will appear, which you can then connect to your SharePoint Online List Reader. Here, you choose web URL and copy the URL to the SharePoint site that you've created. When you then click the refresh button, the list will appear that we've set up, and you can already see the username that I've set up. So you can see that there are a lot of other columns that we don't really need. So what I will do is under the transformation tab, I will quickly manually uncheck all of those so that they are not cluttering up the data that we are seeing and that we are going to process further in this tutorial. I will leave the any unknown new column unchecked because we will later on add new columns. So next, let's get the username of the user who's running the data app. So for that, we can use an extract context properties node. We will send that variable to a row filter, and we will filter the SharePoint list for that username. And after that, we add an empty table switch. So whenever we cannot find the username in our list of usernames, there will be an empty table. And that will allow us to define two scenarios. The first one is when we actually find that username in our list, we simply add a table row to variable node and connect that to the part where the main part of our data app executes. So I've just chosen this column's expressions node, and that will then allow the execution to continue and all the charts to show. The second scenario is that we cannot find the user on our user list, in which case we have the second scenario, the bottom port, which connects to just one view, which shows an unauthorized message. Let's look at the nodes piece by piece. The extract context properties nodes allows for a lot of details regarding your workflow execution to show. I have unchecked the select all properties because we just need the context.workflow.username. If I execute that, you will see the variable name, and it's for now my Windows name because I'm running this on my Windows machine. The row filter, we've selected the title column with operator equals, and we've passed in the variable context.workflow.username as a filter criterion. So in this case, the table is not empty, so the top part executes. And if I now navigate outside, you will see that I still have access to everything. Now let's check this for the user of my second account. So I will save this. We'll now go back to my team and to my workflow. And here I should be able to create a new version because I've just saved it and create that. And once I've created a new version, I can simply go down to my deployment, click on edit, and then select that new version and save the changes. So now if I go back to my other account, and if I refresh and run this app again, this user just sees unauthorized for now. So now let's check what happens if I add this username. So let's just copy the username here. Let's navigate back to my SharePoint and add an item. Paste the username here and save. And now we go back and execute this app one more time. And now this user can see all the data again. Awesome. Okay, now that we have the whitelisting implemented, let's now head towards row level security. So let's go back to SharePoint. And we will now start adding columns. To start with, let's have a choice column. And I want this to be for product. To get the choices, I go back to my workflow. And just up here, I will add a group by node. And in the group by node, I will get the unique options for product, region, and profit center. Let's start with product. If I open the table, I can simply copy this, Control C. If I now go back to my SharePoint, I delete all the other options except the last one, click on it, Control V, and all the options appear. So now I go to more options and I allow multiple selections for this one and save. So let me quickly repeat the same process for the other two columns, profit center and region, and then we will take a look what the final product looks like. So the way that I want this implemented is that if your name is on the list and all the other columns are empty, then you see everything. If your name is on the list and there are restrictions in certain columns, then you only see rows in the dataset that meet those restrictions. And if your name is not on the list, then you get that unauthorized message. So what I want to do is I will put in some restrictions for my secondary account. So let's grab this and edit. And let's say I only want this user to see product A, B, and C. And only profit center 2. And maybe 3. And let's just add some random regions so that's easy to check. All right, so now let's start building the logic that we can use these information to filter our dataset. Okay, back in the workflow, let's make some changes. To start with, we now get also the columns including data that we've selected, for example, the different products or profit centers that a user has access to. And we can see that these are in type of list. In order to get these as individual values, we need to ungroup them. So let's add an ungroup node. And after ungrouping, we will unpivot this so that we have all the relevant values that should restrict access in one column. And after that, we filter out those rows that have a missing value. So now we only have in the column values all the dimensions that someone should have access to. Now let's handle the scenario where someone has access to everything. We will add an empty table switch to check if the table is empty, which would be the case if someone has access to everything and there are no restrictions. And then we apply the same technique, turn it into a variable, and we simply grab all the data from the CSV reader, pass it through column expression legacy, and activate that node and pass it to a case switch end node. So in this case, we have some restrictions, so the table is not empty. And the next steps we want to do is to find out how many columns were restricted. Is it only products and regions, and would be 2? If it's maybe also the profit centers, then it's 3. And that information we will need later on for our logic. So we simply apply a group by node. And in this group by node, we just get the unique count of the column names. Column names is a column that tells us what we are restricting. And then we turn that into a variable. So now comes the most complex part of the workflow. First of all, from the CSV reader, we connect to an unpivot node. And we also flatten the main table so that we have the 3 columns, profit center, region name, and product name, flattened, and the values in the column values. The next step that we do is we use a reference row filter and connect that to our data table that tells us which dimensions we want to keep. We can simply use the column values column in both tables. And as you can see, we start with 1050 column rows and we end with 440. So the next step is that we want to get the number of records that are still in our table per row. And you can see that we still have our row IDs from the original table. We can do this by again using a group by. And this time we get our row IDs from the main data set and aggregate the count of the column values. And we pass that then to a row filter. And this row filter we configure that we pass in the variable. So in this case, we have only restrictions on profit center and product. So 2 out of 3 columns. And we now filter our group by data set for anything that has at least the value 2 in the count. So that now gives us all the row IDs that have information that the user is allowed to view. So in total 140 rows. We can then use that in another row filter. So the top port comes from our CSV reader. The bottom port contains the row IDs that our user is allowed to see. And we simply filter out any row ID from the main data set that is not on our list of row IDs that have data that the user has access to. And then we take our K-switch node and just connect it to the column expressions node that we had. So previously that was going straight from the CSV reader to here. And the last thing that we do is we get rid of our user on list node, because that scenario is by default covered now. Okay, let's quickly save that, and then we will do a quick run with my Windows user. So I've given that user some permissions. Whilst it's loading, let's review those. So I should be allowed to see product ABC and 3 profit centers and all regions. 3 profit centers, ABC and all regions. Very good. And now what I want to do is let's just close this and let's clear my permissions. Let's just keep profit center on for now. So now I should also be allowed to see all products. Yep, all products and just 2 profit centers. And now I remove all restrictions. If we now re-execute, I should have everything available to me. Great. So let's now reset this, save this, and I will quickly deploy a new version. Update the deployment. Now let's check the other user should see 2 products, 2 profit centers and 2 regions only. And after a moment it loads and you can see the access is restricted. Very good. So let's do one last check and let's remove the online user again from my SharePoint list entirely. So let's just delete this record and let's rerun it. So now we should get the unauthorized, which is exactly as expected. So there you have it. Thanks a lot for watching. I will share the final workflow on my KNIME Community Hub. You will find the link in the description below.